Haven't I commanded you? Haven't I commanded you? Be strong and courageous.
Hello, welcome back to Teaching Through the Bible as we begin talking about this battle that goes on between Israel and AI. Not AI, not artificial intelligence, AI. So, what happens here? They initially go into this battle, lose terribly, and have to regroup. This is very different from the Battle of Jericho, which was an amazing victory for the Israelites. Now, what happened here? Well, if you've been reading along, if you've been reading through Joshua, you can see that God had commanded something of Joshua and of the Israelites. In Joshua chapter 6, starting at verse 18. But you, keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest when you have devoted them to take any of the devoted things and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction and bring trouble upon it. But all the silver and gold and every vessel of bronze and iron are holy to Yahweh. They shall go into the treasury of Yahweh. So, Jericho totally destroyed. That's what's supposed to happen. Everything there, it's destroyed. The gold, silver goes to Yahweh, to things presumably for maybe the tabernacle, things like that. It's for God. It's not for the people. Now, this is not the case in every single battle. God gives kind of different indications, different instructions in different battles. Hey, this battle, all the stuff, destroy it all. This battle, y'all can have like the sheep and cattle and whatever. Like he's got different instructions for different times. Here, in this one though, everything's devoted to destruction. This word haram. And that's his command. Very clear command. Turns out, one person didn't listen. So, one person, he decided he's going to take some stuff for himself. We read about this in chapter 7, starting in verse 10. And his sin was taking some stuff for himself, even though God had commanded not to. And because of that, God was not with his people when they went to go attack the small town of Ai. And they lost. And this is a good reminder that it's not about appearances. It's not about human strategy. It's not. Israel's not going to win battles because they're awesome. Okay? They should not have been able to beat Jericho. They should not have been able to get past that wall. But they did. Not because they had a great army, but because God was with them. And so then when they go to this other place, they spy it out and say, oh, hey, not a lot of people here, so we don't need to bring a lot of people. What is that saying right then? What that seems to be indicating is they're thinking from their own strategy. It never says, I don't see anywhere in here where it says, and then they ask God what to do, right? Because with the Battle of Jericho, God said, here's how you're going to do it. And then, so, they knew they needed God's help probably with this seemingly impossible task of defeating Jericho. Then they go to a little town over there like, oh yeah, we got this, no problem. We can do this on our own, God, thanks. They don't go to him. They don't ask him what needs to be done, how it needs to happen. They say, we've got the manpower, we can beat these guys. And then, guess what? The lesser army wins. Just like with Jericho, they forgot, hey, we were the lesser army last time. We were in the position of weakness last time and we won. So why would they presume that the other army, just because it's weaker, that it's not going to be able to beat them? Because it's clearly not about just who's got the bigger, stronger army. But they don't go to God until they're defeated. They get defeated and then they go to him. And doesn't that happen like in life today too? Like how I don't know about you, but like it's very easy when things are going well to just be thinking, oh yeah, I got this. Right? And it's not until something awful happens that then we go back to God and say, wait, I don't understand why this happened. Like, I can't handle this. And now I need to go back to God. We really should be with him and focused on what he says all the time and looking for his guidance all the time. But when things seem to be going well, then it's really easy to forget that. And sometimes God needs to bring us into a situation to remind us to go back to him, right? And so here, maybe some of that's happening too. That they're not going to God, and God then, through this, with this battle, with these the smaller army, the smaller town, through that battle, that sends Joshua back to God to say, God, what's going on? I don't understand. Which is when God says, by the way, you didn't ask me about this earlier, but there was definitely a guy that's he broke my command back there in Jericho, and so y'all got a problem. So maybe if Joshua had gone to God in the first place about this next battle, he would have said, yeah, you shouldn't attack right now because you're going to lose because you got to deal with this guy first. So when that happens, and God indicates who is the person who's violated his command, then we see that you are what you worship. Or, you've probably heard the phrase, you are what you eat. You got dark chocolate, right? You got some candy or an apple. Which is good for you, Obviously, I don't literally turn into an apple, but you eat good food, and that helps your body, right? If you just eat junk food, then that's not going to be good for your body, And here, what happened to this guy? This guy, he took the stuff, and he became the stuff, essentially, right? This was stuff that was supposed to be devoted to destruction. This is stuff that's supposed to be burned up. That's supposed to be destroyed. And he took it. He essentially worshipped this. He wanted this more than he wanted to follow God. And he became like it. Because what was supposed to happen to that? Supposed to be destroyed. What happens to him? He gets destroyed. We see that later on, the end of chapter 7. So, when they go through this whole process, finding out who it is, and he admits he took this stuff, and then starting in verse 24, and Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan, the son of Zerah, and the silver and the cloak, and the bar of gold, and his sons and daughters, and his oxen and donkeys, and sheep and his tent, and all that he had. And they brought them up to the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, why did you bring trouble on us? Yahweh brings trouble on you today. And that's justice. This punishment that fits the crime. You brought trouble on them, you get trouble on you. You value this thing that's supposed to be destroyed more than God. You essentially worship it. Well, you become what you worship. And all Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones that remains to this day. And that can be kind of hard to hear. Because, first of all, you see that all these people had to deal with the consequences. One guy's sin. That's a really important thing to notice here. One guy's sin, more people than just that one guy. All of Israel suffered the consequences with that loss to Ai. And then his family, everyone got destroyed because of his sin. And this also gives us another glimpse into what it means to be in a covenant relationship. He was the head of that covenant, of that family. And as the head of the family, as the representative for the family, sometimes, even if the other people in the family may not, it doesn't say if they knew this happened or if they were approved of this happening or anything like that, he was in charge of the family. And they all got that consequence. Now, that does not mean that they necessarily all had an eternal punishment, that they all necessarily went to hell for this. Like, this is a physical judgment that, well, maybe he, it sounds like maybe he was repentant, maybe he wasn't. Like, it doesn't really give you the spiritual state of him and his family at the end. So this is not necessarily a judgment on them eternally, but there was this physical judgment that went on all of them. And that sucks when you have a terrible covenant head, when you have someone who's in charge, who represents you, that's not good. That sucks. But the flip side is also true. Adam, the first Adam, as he's called, there's the first Adam and the second Adam. We read about this in Romans. The first Adam, the guy who's the first man God created, not a great covenant head. That's how we're all born. We're all born under him. Romans talks about this. He's the head of this covenant. He did a terrible job. He sinned against God, and that's why we have sin. Like, that's how it got started for all humanity. It's why things aren't the way they should be. But Jesus, called the second Adam, or the last Adam, he's the new covenant head for the new covenant. And that's how we, even though we're not perfect, we can be spared from judgment if we're under him. We're either under Adam or we're under Jesus. Those are the two covenant heads of what we read here in the Bible. Romans, again, if you aren't familiar with this, you read through Romans. Paul kind of parses this out. But Adam was the covenant head, but we can be under Jesus. We can move to being under Jesus, and then, just like here, you had a bad covenant head, and everyone underneath got judged. You know what? No one has to get judged. Everyone can go to Jesus. Not everyone does. Some people choose, I don't want to do that. But you can. You have that free offer there to be under Jesus instead, be under his headship, be under his leadership. And then you are counted under his righteousness. And so it can sound really difficult to hear this covenant terminology and how things worked in covenants, and how it may seem unfair, like, hey, well, these people, maybe they didn't do anything necessarily wrong and they're still judged like their covenant head is. But remember the flip side. Yeah, maybe that doesn't sound fair to you, but does kind of sounds not fair in a great way, that we can actually just all go to Jesus and be under his headship and be under his leadership and follow him. And then even though we don't measure up, even though we do a terrible job of doing that, all of us do, we still don't get that judgment, because Jesus' righteousness is what represents us under that covenant. So this is maybe a little bit foreign to some people, thinking about things in terms of covenants. But again, if you read the Romans, Paul does talk about this first Adam, last Adam, and how we're under one or the other, and transferring from death to life when we follow Jesus. So that may be a good read for you right now if this is kind of a little confusing. Also, if you have questions about this, then feel free to comment below and ask about whatever it is that doesn't make sense. I don't want to spend, I could spend an hour talking about this covenant stuff. So I'm not going to spend too long on that. Don't want to get too detracted from the main thing we're talking about within the book of Joshua, not the book of Romans. So, at some point we'll get there to Romans, but right now we're here in Joshua. So the last thing I'll say as we wrap up this lesson is that at the end of this, when they do defeat Ai, they bring the whole army. Now they don't just bring them all up at once. They have kind of a different strategy and stuff than they had with Jericho. But notice God had them bring the whole army. Because remember, it's not about, we have this human strategy, and we'll just, if we think we're stronger, then we're good to go. Like, that's not what it's about. It's about God being with his people or not being with his people. And if he's with his people, doesn't matter what the odds are. Doesn't matter, if they have the worst odds ever, if they have odds that C-3PO is cringing at, doesn't matter. God's got them covered. You don't really need to tell them the odds, I guess you could say. But if God's not with them, it doesn't matter what kind of advantages they think they have. It's not going to go well. Because it's about God being with his people. And not about human strategy and human achievement and human power. God's much greater than that. So that's where we'll leave it today as we finished up this part in Joshua chapter 6, 7, 8. We're going to move on to chapter 9 and following next time. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.